Welcome to Stribling's New York. I am your host, Rob Taub, on WORAM Radio, 710 on your digital dial. Stribling's New York is a show about business, culture, and people. We have a wide range of guests from authors, producers, actors, artists, restaurateurs, as well as people from the world of real estate who can help you buy, sell, or rent a home or apartment. Today's first guest is one of my favorite sports writers, Kristian Winfield, who's on the phone with us. Welcome, Kristian.
Hey, how are you, Rob? Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you back again. You write specifically about the New York Knickerbockers. I'm going to have to play devil's advocate here. I was thinking historically, remember Elgin Baylor was one of the great players. He was like the Michael Jordan before Michael Jordan. And then he went on to run the L.A. Clippers for about 25 years, and they were perennially the worst team in basketball, if not all sports at one time. Is this what Phil Jackson's legacy is now going to be after all of his rings, that he's living in a deluded world and that we're just not going to have a winning team here?
You know, I really hope not. The team hasn't improved necessarily since he took over. You know, they made some kind of stopgap additions, but you know, if you look at the way the team's played, sure, the triangle, you can argue that it looks a little bit better as opposed to 2 seasons ago to last season, but compared to the rest of the league, you know, they're just not keeping up. And you know, this is a really big summer in terms of what Phil is going to do in the future, what the Knicks are going to look like, and what they can put together with this roster. So I think this is really a make or break season, a make or break off season for Phil.
See, I think it's really hard to opine on any sport, having been a journalist for so many years that I've covered just about everything. But the people that really have the day-to-day sense of it better than anybody are the folks like you, who is, you know, really on the beat, and then you're plugged into more of the pulse of the Knicks. So, and how much is Phil involved on a day-to-day basis? Do we know how much time he's even spending in New York during the season? Or is he net jetting back and forth to L.A. to see Jeannie Buss?
Well, that question, if you would have asked me earlier when Derek Fisher was head coach, I would have said not so much, because Derek Fisher wanted to have his own way. He wanted to, you know, kind of be his own coach and not live in the shadow of Phil. But since Kurt Rambis took over, Phil Jackson is at practice. He's leading a triangle offense, you know, kind of seminar with the team. He's been more involved since Kurt Rambis took over. Yes, you know, he was at his Montana Lake house instead of meeting with some coaches, as some people pointed out when he posted his pictures on Twitter. But you know, since Kurt Rambis has taken over, he's been a little bit more involved with the team, which, you know, if you were one of the people who were expecting Phil to you know, get on the sideline and coach a couple games, that's a good sign. But he's not going to be the coach that everyone wants him to be. He's going to use Rambis as his extension of him. So his involvement level has been higher, but not where everyone wants it to be.
Rambis has just never had the kind of personality for me that works well as a coach. I think he's another divisive guy who creates a lot of dissension. So I'm just saying, another season coming up, the Knicks are going nowhere. And are we getting a draft, not a draft choice, are we getting any free agents that are even interested? Who wants to come here? Isn't it ironic? People just wanted to come to New York to be in New York. Now it's they'd rather be going to Oklahoma City. Jeez.
Yeah, it's interesting the way the league is shifting now. People are they're focusing more on winning. You know, you watch David West turn down that big contract from Indiana to sign for pretty much the veterans minimum in San Antonio. I don't think New York has the allure it had once upon a time. It seems, you know, players really want to win, and you know, the Knicks have they could have $25 to $30 million in cap space, but if you look at the team, you've got Carmelo Anthony, who's 30, 31 right now. You've got KP, who played well, but the team doesn't seem to it doesn't seem as if the team is making strides as fast as it should. So I'm not sure if they're going to lure that marquee free agent that Carmelo wants them to sign.
Well, what about Rondo?
You know, Rondo is interesting. The point guard position right now for the Knicks is interesting. They just brought in Tony Roten, who Phil Jackson wants to take a look at, and Phil is on record saying that the team doesn't need that marquee max contract free agent at point guard. And it's difficult right now. We don't know what Rondo was making. What, $9.5 million last season, and he played excellent. He's averaging almost 11-11. His contract, his numbers could go up in terms of his value, and I'm not sure what Phil is willing to spend on a point guard right now. With the salary cap rising, Rondo could command $15-16 million this season. That's another reason why I don't think the Knicks are going to go after Mike Conley. Mike Conley is probably going to command in that $20 million ballpark. So the point guard position is going to be interesting.
Well, what's the alternative if they don't go after an elite point guard?
See, that's another thing I've been juggling with. I'm a big fan of the way Mario Chalmers has been playing. He played very, very well until he had that injury in Memphis, and then they waived him. I think he would be if you're talking triangle offense and you're not talking, okay, we're getting a new head coach and a new system. I think Mario Chalmers is a guy that fits in there. And I think that if you look at who the Knicks have at their point guard position right now, you look at Tony Rowan. He averaged 17 and 5, and granted, it was a pretty battered and pretty terrible Philadelphia 76ers team. But if he can do some of those same things in terms of playmaking, in terms of playing aggressive defense and pushing the tempo, I think he could fit in pretty well with what the Knicks are trying to do, as long as the ball is not in his hands at all the time. And then there's trying to develop Jeremy Grant, the rookie guard who's made strides at the end of last year. I think the Knicks have a bigger issue right now, which is figuring out who to run at that shooting guard. Because if Aaron Aflalo opts out, which is looking like they won't have a single guard on the roster.
I don't see why we'd want to keep him. I found his play wildly inconsistent.
Yeah, that's definitely true. When Aflalo touched the ball, it tended to stop. And granted, you kind of knew that's what you were getting. He's a pretty decent scorer at times, but it seems that the season came towards the end. Kurt Rambis benched him for Sasha Vujacic, and he never kind of got his footing back. And it's an interesting summer for him as well, because he has a player option where, if he opts in, he can make $8 million with the Knicks. But the way he played last season, we don't know what his value is. Is his value higher than an Al-Farouq Aminu who signed for a 4-year, $30 million deal last summer? So it'll be interesting to see what he does, because we're not sure what his value is to other teams, but it doesn't look like he wants to stay in New York.
Well, you've given me much to think about, but ultimately, so do you have a crystal ball if you're going to make a prediction? I mean, is it pretty much continued mediocrity?
I mean, I think it'll be continued improved mediocrity.
I like that.
We saw strides towards improvement last season. You're going to get probably a couple of decent additions. I'm looking at Kent Bazemore, who's an unrestricted free agent in Atlanta. I think he played very well, and he's going to command a bigger contract. I think he's someone that will fit well in New York, but he had he had a scuffle with Porzingis and Carmelo when Atlanta came to the Garden. So I'm not sure how that'll work out. Another player I'm looking at is Evan Turner. I'm hearing that Phil is a fan of him, and I think he would fit in, even though he can't hit a three. I think his playmaking would fit in well in New York.
Okay,
and I think one more thing to
Yes.
look at is if the Knicks do go for Frank Vogel, and I'm not sure how that's going to pan out right now because Vogel is being pursued by Orlando. If they do go for him, I think the Knicks should go for Lance Stevenson too. He's a New York guy who played really well in Indiana under Vogel, and I think those two back in New York would be a great fit.
Where do we find you? What's your website link?
You can find me on Twitter right now
Okay.
at KRISPLASHED, Chris Splash, and I'm also covering the Knicks now for Elite Sports New York, ESNY. They've got a great following now, and they brought me on not too long ago, so I'm happy to write for them.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of your work. Thanks so much for joining us, and I will be speaking with you soon.
Yeah, have me on. I'm looking forward to being on again.
Okay, glad to have you.
Yes, sir.